Now that everything's clean and dry, I even gave the keepers, the springs, and the upper spring seats a quick rinse to make sure there was no abrasive grit or debris on them. It's time to lubricate the valves and load up the valve springs in the valve spring compressing tool here. So first thing I'm going to do is I want a little bit of clean engine oil on all my parts. So I'm just going to put a little bit on my fingers and put it onto each of the parts for the stem and the seat here. And so I've got these all lubricated here. And now I need to load these up into my spring compressor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the upper spring seat on the spring. I'm going to put the keeper on the spring. And then I'm going to set it so that the big end of the keeper is facing away from the hinge of the tool, so it's pointing out that way. And I want it to fit in there nice and snug. And then I'm going to go ahead and crank this down till just before coil bind and or the tool makes contact with itself here. Okay, so that's how I'll bind up here like this. And then we're going to take and we're going to lubricate the stem of our valve, because we don't want these going in dry. We want to make sure that they have some lubrication on startup. And we're going to take the tool, and now we're going to go over to the engine. May as well do the same to the intake right away while we're here. So over at the engine here, we're going to take our valve spring with the upper spring seat facing upwards. I'm going to hold it underneath the valve that's going to be coming down through the guide. Set that in there. I got to tilt it up. Make sure that the keeper goes over the end of the valve stem. And then I want to tilt the tool downwards while I now release the spring tension. And I want to pay attention and make sure that the tool allows the keeper to catch the valve, okay, like that. And so now the tool's sitting down and the keeper's stuck on the valve. And so now it's just a matter of giving a quick yank to the tool and leaving the spring in the keeper in the upper spring seat behind. And my valve is installed for the exhaust. We'll repeat the same process for the intake. So we'll take the keeper, upper spring seat. We got to close up the tool just a smidge. So we'll load it like this. The big hole of the keyhole facing away from the tool. Upper spring seat. This is a smaller diameter here, so the intakes usually are a little bit more finicky. And then we got to crank it down without letting it fly. Right about there should be good. I'm going to take our pre-lubricated valve. Make sure you got the spring the right way. Because of the smaller diameter of the upper spring seat on the intake, these ones can be a little bit trickier. Sometimes we even had to put this in first. So let's actually try that. I'm going to take this out. We'll see if we can get the oil to stick it up to the ceiling of the valve box for us even. Just got to not drop it. Take that out. I'll leave that spring in. So we got the spring back in. Got the upper spring seat. Set that off to the side in a clean spot. spring seat in. Bring my tool over. Do a little switcheroo here. There we go. There we go. And we open it up. We leave a spring tension best we can. We got to make sure that we don't jam it up because of the bottom part, the little bolt boss there. And once we think we got it right, give it a quick yank. And we got to make sure everything's installed properly. So we look up underneath, and that looks okay. We give it a push inwards to make sure that it's fully seated. And now we'll go ahead and we'll recheck our valve lashes. Make sure that they're still within spec, satisfactory. That's a 5 there. And then the intake, that was a 10. That's a pretty good 10. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now it's going to be time to install the cylinder head and the valve box cover. Start getting this reassembled. Okay, I got the valve box cover cleaned up and the bolts for it cleaned up, and I'm going to install that with a nut driver. I cleaned up the cylinder head and the bottom side of the cylinder head also. Whoops. That's cleaned and ready for install. And then I wire wheeled the bolts so that they have clean threads, and I even cleaned the spacers, and I have torque wrench out for install. And we're going to go ahead and put them in loose for now, but eventually once we get the gas tank and everything else in, we'll have to go through and torque them down in 50 pound increments. Let's go over to the engine and get set up. Alright, first comes the valve box cover. So like I said, I'm going to just put this on with a nut driver. We've got to get that lined up. The torque on these are something like 30 pounds. Oh, this one ain't crooked, that's weird. Something like 30 pounds, so it's really not a lot at all. So we want to make sure that we get everything lined up, and we don't want to strip out these tiny little threads. Okay, and that's all we need is wrist tight. In comes the gasket first. And we will set down the cylinder head, doing our best to line things up. Got a couple of spacers. Heat shield. And we got to make sure we put the right bolts in the right spot. So that one's for the exhaust pipe. Full length one there. One's nearest the gas tank, had the most amount of paint. Make sure that they all get started by hand first. Gasket stays lined up. And I'm just going to gently run these down. They'll spin freely still. And we'll leave it like that till we get some of the other accessories on. Okay, let's go ahead and get this carburetor reinstalled. We got to wait for the cylinder head before we can do the muffler. We can do the carburetor right away. Want to make sure that we hook up our link into the appropriate hole. We have our intake elbow on the right side of everything here. Oh, come on. So with that, I want to hook up our fuel line right away too. Make sure that's all the way on. Then we can hook up our governor spring as well. Making sure not to stretch it. There we go. Throttle moves freely, governor's hooked up. Shouldn't have had a chance to stretch the spring. Fuel line is engaged. And now we can snug up, tighten down our intake tube bolts here. And these are going to be to 90 inch-pounds. Intake's on, carb's on, we gotta do the fuel line clamp. Alright, let's go do the gas tank next. So we gotta fit the line there, push that together. Keep that heat shield in place. Make sure the spark plug boot doesn't get trapped under there. Oh, can't see nothing. Gotta leave those loose till the engine cover goes back on. Like the next thing we need to fit is the shroud. So these have to come back out real quick. So shroud can fit on. Make sure everything lines up here. One, two, three. Make sure that this guy lines up right. That guy lines up. This guy's going to come down and around. We'll hook it up to the primer right away. Sometimes when they're really tight like this, it's kind of push and wiggle in a circular motion. We'll get them to kind of walk right up on there. Important to make sure you get these ones started by hand. They like to cross thread pretty easy. I'm going to leave it loose till I get the other one in. that one. Snug that one. And then we can tighten up our starter over here. Alright, got those snugged up. I guess now it's time to torque the head bolts. Okay, time to torque these down. We'll start out at our first 50 inch-pounds here. Start from the center, working our way out. And the last one. Of course, we'll come back and check these after we heat cycle it a couple of times. All right, there's the torque. Let's go ahead and get this muffler fitted so that we can retest. We'll just snug it up for now because I'm going to come back and take it off later to retorque the head bolts. Just a little bit snug. Okay, let's go ahead and set up for our retest. I'm going to take my screwdriver, lock my throttle open. My choke should still be open. I've got my speed selector lever in the stops position so I don't have any spark. I'll hook up my compression gauge. With any luck, we've not only improved our valve sealing but also our overall compression. So hold that where I think you guys can see it. And if you recall, it was 3 pulls. And we've now got 120. So we've got a small improvement, pretty close to 10%. Let's go ahead, see if we can do a cylinder leak down test. Need to take a light, look in here, bring the piston back up to TDC of the compression stroke. So I'm wiggling my crank back and forth. I don't see the valves moving through the hole. We'll set the piston right up at top dead center. Okay, so we'll lock the crank. So that should move. We'll install our hose. Take our gauge here, see if we can bring it around so you guys can see better. Let's see what it sets at. Yeah, look at that, we got full system pressure. Okay, so we've got it set. Make sure this is open. We might be on the compression release, so we're gonna back this off, roll the engine over a little bit. Put that down. All right. some leakage through the crankcase here. Oh, way darn, there's still a little bit of leakage through the exhaust here. Not nearly as much as before. You can see my leakage is way down. But I might be going back in and recutting that seat.
Well, that was a little bit unexpected. Normally, when I lap the valve on some of these older engines like this that are having a little bit of a sealing problem, they seal right up. This one didn't seem to do that. So now I gotta kind of think back and try to figure out if I missed something. You know, like going back and looking at the head gasket, you can see that this corner is a bit dark. Maybe there's a previous overheat that caused the cylinder deck to warp, and now the seat isn't as square or concentric to the valve guide as it used to, and it's just not sitting right. Maybe I didn't lamp it well enough, and it just needs more lapping. Maybe I accidentally nicked the seat with the gasket scraper and didn't realize it at all, and so there's a bit of a nick in it that I have to go fix. I don't really know. Well, I'm gonna find out. Could I run it in its present form? I mean, the compression is better than it was. The leakage is less than it was. You know, there was more air coming from the crankcase, which meant more of the air was escaping the cylinder past the rings instead of the valve, and there was less air coming out of the muffler, indicating that the valve was sealing better, but it still wasn't 100% sealed. And so, you know, it started and ran fine when I drove it up into the back of my truck, and it started fine after replacing the points. Who knows how long it's been leaking. It ran pretty well last season, other than the hard start part. So I could run it, but I know that it's not quite right, and it's in the shop, and I want it right. And so that brings up a couple of points that I wanted to stop and mention here. Number one being is to make sure that you're focused and attentive while you are doing your diagnosis and repairs. Perhaps there's something I overlooked or I missed because I was maybe too focused on making this video or getting through the procedure in a timely manner. Another important point, verify your repair. Make sure that you actually fixed what you set out to fix and that you didn't leave any other problems behind after you're done doing your repair. And then I guess watch for another part to the Simplicity Snowblower project. Chances are I won't film the teardown a second time because that's already been previously recorded. But I plan to come back now with some valve seat and valve face cutting tools, and I guess I've got a good excuse to make a video on how to cut valves and seats. Anyways, hope you learned something here, and thanks for watching.